March 15, 1941. In the frigid waters of the North Atlantic, the night was broken by the glow of burning oil. A British convoy, laden with food, ammunition, and fuel bound for Britain, had just been struck by German U-boats lurking beneath the waves. Torpedoes ripped into merchant hulls, scattering sailors into the icy sea. Men clung to floating wreckage, their desperate cries muffled by the roar of flames. For every ship that sank, Britain's survival slipped further away. This was the Battle of the Atlantic, a war within the war. Germany's Kriegsmarine had unleashed its wolfpacks to sever Britain's lifeline. Every message guiding these predators was encrypted by the Enigma machine, a device that German commanders believed unbreakable. Without a way to pierce its secrets, the convoys were lambs to the slaughter. Yet, far from the Atlantic's fury, the true counterattack was not being waged by destroyers or depth charges, but by men and women working in silence. In the rolling countryside of Buckinghamshire stood Bletchley Park, a Victorian estate with manicured gardens and ivy-draped walls. To the unknowing eye, it looked like nothing more than another country house commandeered for the war. But within its huts and makeshift offices, the greatest secret battle of World War II had begun. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke, the constant clatter of typewriters, and the hum of wireless intercepts arriving in streams of dots and dashes. Young recruits, many barely out of university, leaned over cipher texts, pencils scratching furiously as they searched for patterns. Mathematicians, linguists, chess champions, and crossword enthusiasts were drawn together by a single mission: to break Enigma before Germany's stranglehold tightened around Britain's throat. At the heart of their task lay a machine unlike any other. The Enigma was a compact box with a typewriter keyboard, rows of lamps, and a series of rotating rotors. Each keystroke transformed a letter into a different one, creating a code that changed with every press. With its endless permutations, billions of possibilities daily, it seemed unassailable. Hitler trusted it implicitly. So did his admirals and generals. A German officer once remarked that Enigma was as secure as the laws of mathematics themselves. But in Bletchley, doubts were already being sown. The Allies knew that brute force alone could not win this war of signals. They needed brilliance. Figures like Alan Turing, a young mathematician from Cambridge, began working on methods to mechanize the code-breaking process. Others designed ways to catalog intercepted traffic, hunting for repetition, for the human errors German operators sometimes made. Every fragment mattered. A single slip by an enemy radio man could open a door into the vast machinery of Hitler's war machine. Life at Bletchley was unlike the front lines, but no less relentless. Workers toiled in 12-hour shifts, often through the night. They slept in drafty huts, ate hastily in canteens, and carried the burden of absolute secrecy, even among themselves. Arin, Women's Royal Naval Service operator, later recalled, "We were young, often cold, and always tired. But we knew that what passed through our hands could mean life or death for men at sea." While U-boats prowled the Atlantic, and while London burned under the Blitz, the minds at Bletchley fought their own invisible war. They were not armed with rifles, but with logic, memory, and persistence. Each decrypted message carried the potential to reroute a convoy, to save a city from bombing, or to reveal the next move of the enemy. Still, in 1941, victory seemed distant. The wolfpacks struck faster than the codebreakers could unravel their secrets. Losses mounted. Over 6 million tons of shipping were sunk by year's end. Britain's fate hung in the balance, and the walls of Bletchley Park echoed with the urgency of men and women who knew that their calculations could decide the course of the war. The convoy burning in the Atlantic and the quiet scribbles of pencils in Buckinghamshire were two halves of the same struggle. It was here, in this strange and hidden place, that the question was posed. Could the war be won not by force of arms, but by the sharpness of the human mind? April 2, 1939. In a dimly lit command post near Berlin, a German signals officer typed a message on a strange-looking device. The machine clicked with metallic precision, lamps flickered, and a coded sequence of letters emerged, an order that would direct U-boat movements in the Atlantic. To anyone intercepting the message, it was gibberish. To the Reich, it was the lifeline of war. This machine was the Enigma, the backbone of German military communication, and the weapon Hitler believed could never be defeated. The Enigma had not begun as a tool of war. Invented in the 1920s by German engineer Arthur Scourbius, it was originally marketed to banks and corporations seeking secure correspondence. But in the early 1930s, as Europe slid toward conflict, the German armed forces recognized its potential. They took the civilian design and adapted it for military use, adding layers of complexity that would baffle even the most skilled codebreakers. At its heart, Enigma looked deceptively simple: a box with a keyboard, rows of small lights, and a series of rotors. Yet its genius lay in the mathematics of constant change. Each keystroke passed through multiple rotors that shifted position with every press, producing a new substitution each time. A letter typed as A might emerge as M, but the next time A was pressed, it could become Z or Q, depending on the machine's settings. The addition of a plugboard at the front allowed operators to swap letter pairings, multiplying the complexity. By 1939, the number of possible daily configurations had risen into the trillions. To German commanders, it seemed unassailable. Hitler himself believed that Enigma's codes were impregnable. The Wehrmacht relied on it to transmit orders across occupied Europe. The Luftwaffe used it to coordinate bombing raids. The Kriegsmarine, most dangerously, used it to direct its U-boat wolfpacks in the Atlantic. As long as Enigma held, German forces could strike with precision while their enemies remained blind. The machine became more than a tool. It was a psychological weapon. It gave the German high command a sense of invincibility, a belief that their secrets would never be exposed. A German signals officer later remarked that using Enigma was like speaking in a language only the Reich could understand. But for the Allies, the implications were dire. Each intercepted message was a puzzle that could not be solved. British intelligence could listen to the airwaves, recording streams of coded transmissions, but without the key, it was useless noise. Meanwhile, Allied convoys were being slaughtered. By 1941, U-boats had sunk millions of tons of shipping, threatening to starve Britain into submission. Churchill later admitted that the U-boat peril was the only thing that truly frightened him during the war. Breaking Enigma was not just a matter of intellectual pride. It was a matter of survival. Every unsolved code meant more ships lost, more men drowned, and more supplies failing to reach Britain's shores. Without an answer to Enigma, the Allies faced the very real possibility of collapse before they could even mount an offensive against Nazi Germany. The tension surrounding Enigma was heightened by its adaptability. The Germans regularly changed the daily keys, resetting rotor positions and plugboard settings. The Kriegsmarine, especially, used more sophisticated versions with extra rotors, making their naval codes even harder to break. The Allies knew that solving the machine once would not be enough. It had to be done continuously, day after day, faster than the Germans could change their settings. For Britain, the stakes were clear. Without cracking Enigma, the convoys would fail, the RAF would lose its edge, and any chance of an eventual invasion of Europe, what would become D-Day, would be doomed before it began. In the quiet countryside of Buckinghamshire, at Bletchley Park, the battle against this machine was taking shape. Here, mathematicians, linguists, and codebreakers would take on the impossible. But in 1939 and 1940, the Enigma still loomed like an iron curtain across the airwaves. To most, it was unbreakable. And that was exactly why the fight to defeat it would become one of the most extraordinary struggles of the Second World War. Long before Bletchley Park became the nerve center of Allied code-breaking, the first blows against Enigma were struck in Warsaw. In the early 1930s, Poland found itself trapped between two giants, Nazi Germany to the west and the Soviet Union to the east. Survival demanded foresight, and in 1932, the Polish Cipher Bureau began recruiting young mathematicians, men with the abstract brilliance to solve puzzles that defied conventional military thinking. Among them were Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rositzky, and Henryk Zygalski. Trained at the University of Poznan, these three mathematicians would become the unsung pioneers of code-breaking. Their task was daunting: to unravel the mysteries of a machine that even seasoned cryptographers believed unbreakable. But unlike traditional codebreakers, the Poles approached Enigma not as a linguistic problem, but as a mathematical one. Rajewski in particular applied the principles of permutation theory to reconstruct the wiring of Enigma's rotors. With painstaking logic and intercepted German traffic, he managed to build a mathematical model of the machine. By late 1932, Poland had not only penetrated Enigma's secrets, but could also read German military messages, an achievement that would remain hidden from the world for years. The Poles did not stop at theory. They invented tools to mechanize the process. Zygalski developed perforated sheets, later known as Zygalski sheets, that allowed analysts to align patterns in encrypted texts. Meanwhile, the team built the Bombe cryptologiczna, an electromechanical device that could test rotor settings faster than any human. These breakthroughs represented the first systematic assault on Enigma, years before Britain entered the fray. Yet time was against them. As the 1930s progressed, the Germans upgraded Enigma, introducing new rotors and stricter key procedures. By 1938, Polish resources were strained, and the Cipher Bureau realized they could no longer keep pace alone. Then came July 1939. With war looming, Polish intelligence made a fateful decision. In secret meetings near Warsaw, they shared everything: their methods, their devices, their hard-earned knowledge, with Britain's MI6 and France's Deuxième Bureau. A British officer who attended later recalled that the Poles had given us the essential keys to the kingdom. It was an act of quiet heroism. Poland knew it was likely to be overrun, yet its mathematicians ensured their work would not die with them. Within weeks, German forces invaded Poland, and the Cipher Bureau scattered. Some escaped through Romania, others joined French resistance networks, but many would not survive the war. Their names rarely appeared in Allied reports, but without their foundation, Bletchley Park's triumphs might never have been possible. In Britain, the handover changed everything. The Government Code and Cipher School, GCCS, a small unit relocated from London to the Buckinghamshire estate of Bletchley Park, suddenly had a head start. British intelligence officers realized that this was not a battle for traditional soldiers, but for mathematicians, linguists, and chess players. Men and women capable of thinking in patterns beyond the ordinary. Figures like Dilly Knox, a veteran codebreaker from World War I, immediately grasped the value of the Polish discoveries. He described the gift as a torch passed in the darkness. Soon, the British began assembling a new generation of codebreakers, among them the young mathematician Alan Turing, to carry the work forward. The transition marked a turning point. From Warsaw's cramped cipher offices to the sprawling huts of Bletchley, the war of intelligence was becoming international. What began as the effort of 3 Polish mathematicians would grow into a vast enterprise involving thousands, guided by the conviction that brains, not bombs, could change the tide of war. The legacy of that handover was profound. Poland's early breakthroughs, often overshadowed in popular memory, laid the mathematical and conceptual foundation for what the Allies would later call Ultra, the greatest intelligence success of the Second World War. As Bletchley's recruits settled into their new home, they inherited not just papers and machines, but the responsibility of turning fragile beginnings into decisive advantage. The next chapter of the Enigma story would unfold not in Warsaw, but in the quiet countryside of England, where secrecy and intellect would converge in a battle for survival. Behind the brick walls and iron gates of a quiet English estate, a secret world pulsed with urgency. Bletchley Park, codenamed Station X, was no ordinary country house. It was the beating heart of an invisible war, where silence, secrecy, and sleeplessness became the weapons of choice. From 1939 onward, this sprawling Victorian mansion and its scattered wooden huts transformed into a hive of activity, manned by thousands who fought not with rifles, but with pencils, typewriters, and machines that clicked endlessly through the night. The estate was divided into sections, each known simply as a hut. Hut 6 specialized in Army and Air Force Enigma traffic. Hut 8, led by the reserved but brilliant Alan Turing, focused on deciphering naval codes. Others processed intelligence into reports, sorted intercepted messages, or analyzed German communications patterns. Yet even inside Bletchley, secrecy remained absolute. Workers in one hut rarely knew what another was doing, and questions were discouraged. One RIN operator later recalled that, "You learned never to ask. Curiosity was dangerous. The atmosphere was relentless. Day and night, wireless operators captured Morse transmissions from German stations across Europe. Sheets of paper carrying long strings of random letters piled high, waiting for analysts to find the patterns buried within. Inside cramped huts, young women from the Women's Royal Naval Service sat at clattering typewriters, transcribing messages as fast as they arrived. In another room, clerks operated sorting machines, feeding punched cards into mechanical readers that hummed and rattled under the pressure. The physical environment reflected the burden. Smoke hung heavy in the air. Stacks of decrypted sheets reached shoulder height. The sound of machines, the Bombe, the Hollerith tabulators, and later the massive Colossus, filled the rooms with a mechanical rhythm. For many, time blurred. Shifts stretched late into the night, and days off were rare. Diaries speak of exhaustion, but also of a grim pride. Every letter decoded meant lives saved. At the center of this secret war was Alan Turing, a shy Cambridge mathematician with a reputation for brilliance and eccentricity. In Hut 8, Turing and his team built the electromechanical bomb machine, designed to test thousands of possible Enigma rotor settings per second. Its rotating drums clattered ceaselessly, each halt raising hope that an Enigma key for that day had been discovered. One operator later remembered the strange mix of monotony and suspense. Hour after hour you heard nothing, and then suddenly a stop, the possibility that a convoy somewhere might be saved. But Bletchley was more than machines. It was people, ordinary men and women drawn from universities, teaching, banking, and clerical jobs. Many were in their early 20s, plucked from Oxford or Cambridge for their language skills or mathematical genius. Others came from more humble backgrounds. One young woman, who joined straight from teaching elementary school, later recalled how surreal it felt to sit beside dons and professors, all working in silence toward the same urgent goal. The work was grueling, and mistakes carried enormous weight. A single error in transcription could mean an Enigma message remained locked. Workers carried the knowledge that any lapse might condemn sailors to drown in the Atlantic or soldiers to die on foreign fields. Yet secrecy forbade them from speaking of their burden, even to family. For years, parents and spouses believed their children were merely clerks stationed in some unimportant office. The truth remained sealed under the Official Secrets Act. The social life of Bletchley was a strange mix of austerity and resilience. The cafeteria served meals under wartime rationing, and bicycles lined the grounds, carrying staff between huts in all weather. In rare off hours, there were concerts, lectures, and even games of tennis on the estate lawns. These small fragments of normality kept morale alive amid the strain of endless shifts. By 1943, more than 9,000 people worked at Bletchley Park, 3/4 of them women. Few knew the scale of their achievement at the time. Reports were distilled into brief intelligence summaries, marked Most Secret, Ultra, and couriered directly to Churchill's desk. The Prime Minister later called Bletchley's staff the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. Inside the huts, no one thought of themselves as heroes. They were simply doing their duty, quietly, anonymously, under crushing pressure. Yet every intercepted message that fell open under their hands shifted the balance of power, shortening the war day by day. As Bletchley grew, so did the complexity of its mission. The challenge was no longer just about cracking Enigma. It was about processing, analyzing, and disguising the use of intelligence so that the Germans never suspected their secrets were compromised. The hidden world of Bletchley Park had become not only a workplace, but a battleground in its own right. June 1, 1942. In the North Atlantic, cold spray lashed the decks of a merchant convoy bound for Britain. Dozens of ships, heavy with food, oil, and weapons, steamed in tight formation, aware that unseen predators stalked beneath the waves. German U-boat wolfpacks had been sinking Allied shipping at a rate of hundreds of thousands of tons per month. Britain, reliant on imports, stood on the brink of starvation. But on this day, the convoy sailed straight through the gauntlet untouched. The reason was not more escorts or lucky weather. It was Ultra, the top-secret intelligence born from the cracked codes of Enigma. From 1941 onward, Ultra became one of the Allies' most decisive weapons. Decrypted German signals revealed U-boat patrol routes, their rendezvous points, and even the resupply positions of milk cow submarines. Armed with this hidden knowledge, Allied commanders quietly rerouted convoys around danger. One naval officer later recalled how miraculous it seemed. It was as if someone had lifted the fog from the ocean. Ultra did not eliminate losses, but it blunted the wolfpack threat enough for Britain to endure. The influence of Ultra extended far beyond the Atlantic. In the scorching deserts of North Africa, intelligence played a pivotal role in the Battle of El Alamein in late 1942. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the famed Desert Fox, relied on Enigma to coordinate his Africa Corps. Unknown to him, British General Bernard Montgomery often had his battle plans in hand before they unfolded. Decrypts revealed Rommel's shortages of fuel and ammunition, his precise troop dispositions, and even his retreat strategies. When Montgomery struck at El Alamein, his timing and tactics were sharpened by Ultra. Churchill would later describe the victory as the end of the beginning, a turning point in the war, and it owed much to signals intercepted far away in the huts of Bletchley Park. Yet secrecy remained paramount. To preserve the illusion that Enigma was unbreakable, Allied commanders often disguised the source of their intelligence. Victories were attributed to reconnaissance flights or intercepted radio chatter. Sometimes, this deception came at a terrible price. There were moments when convoys or units could have been saved, but intervention would have risked alerting the Germans that their system had been compromised. Analysts at Bletchley Park carried the unbearable weight of knowing men would die, so the larger secret could live. One WAF officer later admitted, "The hardest part was watching ships go down on the maps, knowing we might have prevented it, but we couldn't reveal how." Ultra's reach extended across every theater. In the Mediterranean, it enabled the Royal Navy to ambush Italian convoys supplying Rommel, starving the Africa Corps of vital supplies. In the East, decrypted messages warned of German offensives, feeding Stalin intelligence he accepted cautiously, always suspicious of Western motives. Even in the vast Pacific, signals intelligence guided Allied forces, though Japanese codes presented their own formidable challenges. What made Ultra so effective was not only the brilliance of the codebreakers, but the discipline of its handling. Messages were stripped of any trace of their true origin and distributed only to those with direct need to know. Churchill himself kept the circle tight, famously remarking that Ultra was worth several armies in the field. But Ultra was never flawless. There were delays in decoding, false trails in interpretation, and moments when the flood of information overwhelmed the analysts. Commanders had to weigh the intelligence carefully against battlefield realities. Still, by 1943, Ultra had become a strategic backbone of Allied planning. It shortened the Battle of the Atlantic, tipped the balance in North Africa, and laid the groundwork for the greatest deception of all, Operation Fortitude, which misled Hitler about the true landing site of D-Day. The ethical dilemmas, the victories, and the silences all underscored one truth. Ultra was a weapon unlike any other. It was invisible, intangible, and devastatingly effective. It proved that wars could be shaped not only by tanks and bombers, but by hidden messages, captured in the ether, decoded in secret, and used with ruthless precision. As the Allies advanced toward ultimate victory, Ultra's legacy grew. The men and women of Bletchley Park never stood on the front lines, yet their work saved convoys, won battles, and reshaped strategy. In silence, they had shifted the course of the war. June 5, 1944. In southern England, fields were crowded with soldiers, tanks, and landing craft preparing for the greatest amphibious invasion in history. Yet across the Channel, German generals remained convinced the Allies would strike not at Normandy, but at Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France. This fatal miscalculation was no accident. It was the product of one of the most ambitious deception campaigns ever waged, a game of shadows built on code-breaking, double agents, and illusions. By 1944, intelligence had become the backbone of Allied planning. At Bletchley Park, teams working around the clock intercepted and decrypted German Enigma traffic. The Ultra reports provided commanders with near real-time insight into the movements of enemy divisions, Luftwaffe readiness, and U-boat deployments. These decrypts alone, however, were not enough. To ensure the success of Operation Overlord, the Allies needed to manipulate what the Germans believed. Operation Fortitude was born. The plan involved creating a phantom army under the command of General George S. Patton. Using inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, dummy landing craft, and fabricated radio traffic, the Allies built the illusion of a massive force gathering in Kent, poised to attack Calais. German reconnaissance planes dutifully photographed these decoys, and reports filtered back to Berlin, reinforcing Hitler's conviction that Calais was the true invasion point. Meanwhile, the double-cross system ensured German intelligence networks in Britain worked entirely under Allied control. Double agents like Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, fed carefully constructed reports to the Abwehr. These reports blended accurate information with deliberate misdirection, enough to maintain credibility while shaping German expectations. One such agent later noted how surreal it felt, knowing a single word of misinformation could alter the deployment of entire divisions. Bletchley Park's decrypts confirmed the deception was working. Messages between German commanders revealed that even after Allied troops stormed Normandy on June 6, the Wehrmacht High Command still clung to the belief that this was only a diversion. For weeks, Hitler held back the powerful 15th Army, convinced the real blow would fall at Calais. This hesitation allowed the Allies to secure and expand their beachhead, buying precious time to push inland. The stakes could not have been higher. Eisenhower and his staff relied heavily on ultra updates to monitor German reactions hour by hour. When panzer divisions began to mobilize toward Normandy, Bletchley intercepts gave Allied commanders the warning they needed to prepare countermeasures. Without this insight, the fragile landing zones could have been crushed before reinforcements arrived. The deception game extended even to the skies and seas. False convoys steamed across the channel toward Calais, their radio signals buzzing with fabricated chatter. Allied bombers pounded rail lines leading to Normandy, guided by decrypts that revealed which routes the Germans depended on most. Each move was a calculated dance of truth and lies, designed to paralyze German decision-making at the crucial moment. For the men storming the beaches on D-Day, the hidden war of signals and shadows was invisible. They faced barbed wire, machine gun fire, and brutal losses. Yet behind the chaos, intelligence had tilted the odds in their favor. One officer later recalled that, "We fought with rifles and bayonets, but our greatest weapon was information." By July 1944, the deception had achieved its ultimate goal. German reserves remained tied down at Calais long after the Allies had established a firm foothold in Normandy. The success of D-Day was not merely the triumph of overwhelming manpower and firepower. It was also the victory of codebreakers, analysts, and deceivers who had waged a silent battle from huts in the English countryside. The story of D-Day is remembered for the bravery of those who stormed the beaches, but its success depended on a far larger tapestry of ingenuity. Inflatable tanks, false radio signals, double agents, and decrypted messages had all conspired to trick one of the most powerful military machines in history. As the beaches of Normandy filled with the dead and wounded, and as Allied troops pressed inland, the hidden battle of Bletchley Park and Operation Fortitude revealed its decisive impact. Victory on June 6 was not just won in blood and steel, but in secrets, lies, and the brilliant patience of those who fought in the shadows. May 8, 1945. As church bells rang across Europe on Victory in Europe Day, crowds filled the streets of London, Paris, and Moscow in celebration. But in the quiet halls of Bletchley Park, there were no parades. The men and women who had spent the war breaking codes packed up their notes, locked away their machines, and walked into obscurity. Their triumph was one of the greatest secrets of the Second World War. Winston Churchill famously called them the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. Their silence was absolute. Under the Official Secrets Act, thousands of veterans could not speak of what they had done, not to friends, not to family, not even decades later. Many went to their graves without ever revealing their contribution to victory. Yet historians now estimate that Ultra, the intelligence produced from Enigma decrypts, shortened the war by at least 2 years, perhaps as many as 4, saving millions of lives across continents. The true scale of Bletchley's legacy only emerged long after the war. The intercepted messages rerouted convoys away from U-boats, guided Montgomery's plans at El Alamein, and paralyzed German reinforcements during D-Day. Each soldier who survived a battlefield, each merchant sailor who made it safely across the Atlantic, carried with them an invisible debt to a team of mathematicians, linguists, and clerks working in huts in Buckinghamshire. The opening scene of a convoy in peril on the Atlantic was not just a story of steel and torpedoes. It was a story of pens, papers, and circuits, quietly defeating the wolfpacks from thousands of miles away. Bletchley Park also left a legacy that extended far beyond the war itself. Alan Turing's pioneering work on the electromechanical bomb, and later his design concepts for the ACE computer, laid the foundations of modern computing. The principles he explored, algorithms, automation, artificial intelligence, form the backbone of the digital world today. Others, like Gordon Welchman, developed traffic analysis techniques that would become staples of modern intelligence. The structures built at Bletchley outlived the war. Britain's government code and cipher school evolved into GCHQ, while in the United States, wartime code-breaking efforts gave rise to the National Security Agency. The Cold War was shaped not only by nuclear weapons, but by the invisible architecture of signals intelligence, an inheritance of Bletchley Park's breakthroughs. The lessons learned in secrecy, deception, and analysis were passed directly into the new age of espionage. Yet perhaps the most profound legacy was human. For 6 long years, thousands of individuals, many of them barely out of university, labored under crushing secrecy. Their diaries, released decades later, speak of exhaustion, of pride, of lives forever altered by the weight of what they had done. One recalled, years later, "We saved lives, though we never saw the faces." That was enough. Recognition came slowly. Only in the 1970s and 80s did the veil begin to lift, and the names of Bletchley's heroes entered public memory. Today, the estate stands preserved as a museum, a reminder of the quiet war waged within its huts. Visitors walk past the bomb machines, the teleprinters, the radio intercept logs, and they see not only relics of code-breaking but echoes of a struggle that shaped the world. Wars are often remembered in battles, Stalingrad, Midway, Normandy. Yet the victory of Bletchley Park was won in silence. It was measured not in captured ground but in intercepted signals, not in parades but in the lives that quietly continued because a message had been read in time. The men and women of Bletchley fought not with rifles or tanks, but with logic, perseverance, and unyielding secrecy. As history reflects on the Second World War, one truth endures: sometimes the greatest victories are unseen. And in the shadowed rooms of Bletchley Park, where typewriters clattered and machines whirred through the night, a hidden army proved that brilliance, patience, and silence could defeat tyranny.